Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Welcome back, friends. Today we're sitting in Brooklyn, New York, in a place that I could certainly not afford off my skate shop income, but my sister, who's a badass, and her husband bought back in June. They graciously said, "Hey, Chris, do you want to come visit?" And I said, "Well, are you going to let me use your place to record some cool interviews?" And they said, "Sure." So here I am. I reached out to some friends of mine out in LA who I knew spent time in New York to say, "Hey, who knows somebody in New York City?" Because I don't really know anybody out here. I live in Wisconsin. And when you just look up on social media, people don't put their cities all that often. Santino the Misfit, aka Santino Campanelli, was a guest on the show before. One of my favorite people, like from the show and outside of the show, connected me to this really hilarious man who has his own show, who's written for other things, who apparently is also an artist, which I'm going to ask about. So welcome to the show, John Poveromo.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Santino's a good dude. So as soon as you told me that you knew him, I was like, I don't ever get up this early. And I know it's not even technically, I think it's like 11:30 now or whatever. Yeah, no. And I was like, oh man, if Santino knows him, like, I'm just going to make it happen. Like, I'm just going to do it. Because I got a gig later in Manhattan later tonight. So I'm just going to be spending the whole fucking day in the city.
Oh, rad. I thought I think my sister mentioned something about going to a comedy show tonight. So one of her friends or something was performing. I wonder if I don't know who it is.
Oh, that'd be cool.
But maybe I can come out to that. That would be sick. And then we could put that into the little interview too, like a little cameo of look, this is what he actually does besides sitting on Chris's show.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. I want to know in your own words, who are you and what are you passionate about?
Oh, man. My name is John Poveromo, as you said, and I've been doing stand-up for 17 years, and I have to say that is... I think my passion is probably any area of comedy and entertainment. Like, that is what I really like to do, because even just through stand-up, I found different avenues to take my creativity and kind of passion for anything in the arts. Like, I was thinking about that recently because... after doing stand-up for 17 years, all the other avenues this has led to, like I've written for Newsweek, I've written for other television shows, I've written for other comedians, I've traveled all over the country to do stand-up, I have acted in certain things, I've done voiceover, so I'm like, and this all comes from wanting to make people laugh and basically telling dick jokes on stage for, and bombing in the beginning, you know what I mean? Like, isn't that, like, it was a very weird thing that kind of, like, crystallized itself for me maybe after the pandemic or during it, where I was like, holy shit, like, because you got to take stock of your life at that point, right? Like, I mean, everybody did, whether they wanted to or not. So, I had to revamp kind of what I was doing and like how I was going to cope with not being able to tour and stuff. And then I was like, oh, I've got this plethora of shit behind me that I've, for better or worse, just done because I like to keep moving. So, and you'd mentioned, that I was an artist too, and I put out a book of cartoons and stuff, and I've drawn stuff for magazines. So, like, that's just part of the tool belt, man. And I think that's my passion, is just to keep going and keep being as creative as possible.
Yeah, well, and I think networking, like, as horrible as it sounds, who really makes a huge difference. And when you're funny, like, people like being around you because you're fun. You know what I mean? Assuming you have a good personality off stage as well. But generally speaking, like, when you do something like touring around, you're talking to all these other creative people that knows this person, who knows that person, who does this thing, who does that thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're top of mind with people and they know what you do and they generally like you, it's pretty easy then when you have something else you want to do to just kind of like throw to the masses of people, like, hey, I want to I'm putting out this book. Does anyone know anything about like where this might go or who can give me advice on something? And usually there's somebody in that void who can like raise their hand and say, hey, I'll help out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when you do something like comedy, like, you are an entrepreneur. Really, all creatives are entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And so you're building this personal brand and you're building a whole business behind it. Those skills translate directly to anything else that you want to do. Like, I own a skateboard shop. It just turned 9 years old last week, so I've been doing it a long time. Thank you very much. But building that up, those skills translated into me doing a podcast too. Like, even when I first started doing my show, I did a 10-episode season. I recorded, edited the whole thing, ready to rock, and gave myself a month to market and promote. Like, how do I want to put this out? Nice. Versus most people who do a podcast would just like put out the first episode when they finish it, and then just put out the next episode when they finish it. And there's not really a strategy. Yeah. Versus me understanding that like how you release a product is just as important or more so than what the product itself is.
Right.
Kind of put me in a position then to be, relatively successful right off the bat and kind of go in that direction. So for you, you wanted to always do comedy from when you were young, but obviously, like, I'm sure you mentioned to your parents or something, hey, I want to tell jokes for a living. They're going to say that's not a real thing. And even to yourself, I'm sure you're like, well, that's not a real thing. So how did you, what were your backup plans, I guess, going into, because I know you did a year of college. What were your backup plans of like, what am I going to do other than comedy? How am I going to supplement income? Like, what else am I going to do that's like the real job?
I had no plans for any kind of backup shit. Like, I know you're supposed to, but I had a theater arts teacher in high school. Her name is Hildy Harper. We're still talk to her. We're still close. But I remember something she had said when we were kids, and it was, if you're going to go into the arts and you have a backup plan, you're going to fall back on it. And I don't know how many people that stuck with, but it did stick with me because for two reasons. One, I didn't want to do anything else. So that was just a great kind of excuse to be like, oh no, this authority figure, for better or worse. I mean, how many people do that and fail, you know what I mean? Or don't get where they want to get. But I was like, oh, this is great because that's my line of thinking anyway. Now it's confirmed by this other human being who also probably wanted to go into a different direction. And, let's face it, wound up teaching and she was great at it. And I'm sure she loved it, but who wouldn't want to direct or do something, else? But she was like, if you have a backup plan, you're going to fall in it. And I was like, that's a great piece of advice. And I kept that kind of with me the entire time. So when I decided I was going to do stand-up, I just wound up, I was like, hey, this is going to be it. So I'm going to do my due diligence. I wound up finding a class to take. Linda Smith, who was an Emmy-winning writer and comedian. She was the head writer for the Rosie O'Donnell Show for years. So when I'd seen the pamphlet, actually it was my mom who saw it. And she was like, would you be interested in this? Because she knew I was miserable going to college. And she knew I kind of always in the back of my head wanted to do stand-up of some kind. And it was just kind of gnawing at me. And I was just unhappy. So she found this thing and she was like, hey, look, I stumbled upon this. I don't know how you feel about it, but, it's in the city, yada, yada, yada. And not the best probably way to go about doing stand-up, but I was afraid to do anything kind of different. So, and by that, I mean like, your friends do the ABCs, right? So it's high school, college, marriage, kids, and they just, or job or whatever, and then marriage, kids, and they follow that kind of path. So to me, taking the class seemed to legitimize it as opposed to just dropping out completely. Sure. You know what I mean? Which is just bullshit entirely. But to me, that still made more sense and I could justify it to myself and then also people in my life and be like, oh no, but I'm actually paying for a thing, you know what I mean? And I get to whatever. But it wound up being great because there was 30 other people in the class and, they were of different ages and stuff. And some of them were just looking to kind of build up their own, oh man, when like you work at a banking job and you have trouble talking in front of people, so they're trying to get that. So it's like, take a comedy class and you'll be able to have all the confidence, whatever.
Yeah.
So there were some of those people in there, whatever. But Linda and I, hit it off. And the first set I ever did after that went really well. And then from that point on, I just had a bug. And she was like, you're very natural. You're very good at it. And I had to kind of figure out who I was. And then I just got job after job of like, I worked at a bank, basically. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer for where I worked. But I worked at a bank. So doing comedy, I got a job at a PNC Bank in a grocery store. And that was also fucking brutal, by the way, because it's so funny to me. Like, this is when you realize, like, all the shit that people tell you is just bull completely. Like, you can curse on this show, right? Because I'm already, great. Lorelai was like, I was terrible at math. And still am terrible at math. I have no.
But you were a banker.
Yeah, and I was like, this is a fucking joke. Like, this is ridiculous. But like, basically all you have to do is run through their steps. Right. So like, I went to training, and it was a bunch of people who had also like older people. I was 21 maybe at the time. And they, they'd all lost their jobs or they were coming from someplace else or they were whatever. And I'm like fresh-faced. Don't know what the fuck is going on. Hated getting up early in the morning. I had to travel to go to these like training sessions, but it didn't matter. It wasn't pass fail. It was put in the time in this thing. And they would have a guy in front of a whiteboard and he would tell you how much money you were going to make. And I didn't quite understand that because I thought I worked at a bank. And it was like the advent of their, like a sales bank. Yeah. So I was in a grocery store and they would be like, don't concentrate on actual banking. Try to get, money market accounts and savings accounts. And I was doing it in a town where people were not making a shit ton of money. So it was insanity, and it was stupid, and I hated it. But I was in the back of my head, I was like, this isn't what I do, and I loved having that mindset, because every place I worked, it was, this is not who I am, and this is not what I do. So none of that shit really mattered to me. I never been fired from a job, but I kind of just got my paycheck and left. And then, and I think, to employers and shit like that, that's probably aggravating to have somebody come in who's kind of aloof.
Sure.
And there was like some tension there, and some people got it and they understood.
Yeah.
And other people were really like, fuck this guy. We're going to make him miserable here. So It was always a bit of a fight, so on the weekends and maybe weeknights, I would go and audition or do stand-up wherever the hell I could, and then I would just go to work, and that was it. And try not to hang myself with my tie.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think people who have an actual vision of what they want to do, like at a lot of jobs, people recognize that, right? The kind of like opposite, even in my opinion, a lot more pathetic version is when people are way too into a job that clearly doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're just trying to do their absolute best when it's like, you want to sit them down and say, okay, but what is it you actually want? Like, do you even want to be here? Because I know you don't. I get it. You're trying to work hard, but if you're going to work this hard and care this much, like, why don't we figure out where you should put that time and energy? Even if it is in a corporate career, but like, probably not here. Like, that's probably not what you want to do. My last real job was for Verizon, and I didn't give a shit about that either.
Yeah.
And all it was sales. And I do think that it was a good stepping stone as far as like, I learned how to sell whatever. And what I found was the best sales people sell themselves as a solution to people's needs, not a product, which is really going to be the case for literally anything in entrepreneurship, right? You're selling yourself as, hey, you want me to come play and be on this set, right? Because it's going to be hilarious and I'm going to bring some people. Hey, you want to come be a guest on my show because I'm going to get you to some of these other things and it's going to be great. The banter is going to be hilarious, blah, 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 blah. Right? So you're always kind of selling that.
Even at those jobs, even at those jobs though too, like you find people who keep you, like I know some of that stuff and I stayed at some of those positions because the higher up liked me, what I mean? Or I had a lot of personality that I brought to it. I always brought myself to it. I remember one of the jobs, I worked at a library too for a long time while I was still doing stand-up. Bank was full-time, and then I went and worked at a library, which is part-time. And that was the first time I was doing well in stand-up, and I could go from full-time to part-time. Okay. So the library though, I remember being called into the office at one point. I had like 5 different bosses, and they were like, we just need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, what's up? Like, did I fuck something up, or am I, whatever? I'm like, no, it's none of that. They're like, you're too self-assured. Can you tone? And I was just like, what? And then they were like, yeah, some of the other employees are like a little like uncut, and it was just because I was like, I got the job really quickly. Cause you were either part-time permanent and like a floater basically, or you were, the dude who got the job at the, whatever. And they moved me up really quick because I'm not a moron. You know what I mean? Like you can do something competently. Sure. But they were like, oh, you're a little too comfortable. And I thought that was so funny that the dynamics at the workplace are like, you have to earn it. And they were just exhausted, there were people who were lifers there. And I don't think they liked that I was like, just kind of going with the flow and, I'd be there when I'd be there, and that was it. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I understand. I mean, again, if like people have so much invested into this thing, even if they hate it, they just know that this is kind of their only option at this point. When somebody who clearly like doesn't even want to do it forever comes in and just gets what they've been looking for, I'm sure it would be infuriating. Yeah. Getting back to comedy though, I think like when you say going and taking this class is what like legitimizes it, at least to be able to tell people like, oh, okay, well, this is kind of legit because I'm paying for a class or whatever. The big thing is it really is who you know. And so when you get in and you start doing stuff like that, I tell that to like artists and stuff too, because I'm also an artist. That's what these dumb little monster stickers are. These are great, dude.
But I tell people the same thing. Like if you want to get invited to an art show, go to the other art shows. Right. Like you have to know the other people. And so even just getting in the class, even if it's just a bunch of other novices, for one, you don't know where those people are going to go, so why wouldn't you want to be involved with them? Plus then the teacher, like those things, those relationships are what are going to introduce you to even just to know about other comedy things that are happening, even if they can't connect you to something, just to tell you, hey, this is happening. Right. But also then for like other shows and other opportunities, that's how you get them. You're not going to find those opportunities, especially if you're just totally on your own and you don't talk to anybody. It doesn't matter if your comedy is good. No one's going to know that. Right. So like, how are you going to get those? So what was the first like bigger opportunity that came that allowed you to start like, I guess, when was it, and what was the opportunity that allowed you to step away from like any kind of a regular job to just fully go working for yourself?
I don't think there was one opportunity in particular. I think it was my decision. Ultimately, a lot of stuff in my career has been me giving it to myself. We should probably rephrase that. But
Perfect
I mean,
soundbite.
yeah. So I mean, I've definitely had people along the way who've like helped me do stuff and whatever. But, you know, I think after for instance, even when I first started, you know, Linda had taken a liking to me and knew that I had something. So, you know, she passed along my information to another club in the city. And then that club beget another club, beget whatever, you know. And then I wound up doing every Tuesday night at this, it's now called Broadway Comedy Club, but it was still the Improv when I started. And Bud's wife owned it. So it was a nice kind of place to be and kind of work out material. So I got a lot of opportunities to do that kind of stuff. And through doing that gig, I got to go out with a dude who was a headliner. And he would take me out on the road with him. He had a DUI, but he would take me out on the road. He had a DUI, I had a new car, and that's how that kind of worked too. But no, we got along really well, and he knew I was funny. So, you know, he would be like, you know, let's go. I've got this gig in the Catskills. I've got this gig in upstate New York and, you know, Connecticut or whatever the hell he was. And I would just travel with him to gigs. So I didn't have to there was a lot of, when I first started, there was bringer shows. And they are a fucking scam. You know what I mean? And it's the idea of like, oh, you got to pay your dues, but in the worst fucking possible way, where you don't even grow as a comic, and the pressure is more on whether or not you're going to bring 10 people so you can do your 3 fucking minutes and then bomb anyway. You know what I mean? So there's no like what you're concentrating on is not your art.
Yeah, I've never heard of a ringer show. Bringer? What? I don't understand.
A bringer is you have to bring people. So if you want to do somebody's show, they were really big around like mid 2000, like early 2000s to mid 2000s. And I think some people still try to do it in like LA and around here, but there's so many places to perform now, like, you know, little shows, vignettes, music halls and stuff. So nobody's doing that shit.
Sounds like the dumb little commission jobs where they say, hit up your friends and family and sell them all your stuff.
Well, exactly. Well, the scam is like if you wanted to perform at one of the name clubs, they didn't have places, like they didn't want to be responsible for bringing in an audience. And they weren't doing that well to the point where they could be open like they were in the 80s, where it was every week. Yeah. So they were like, well, we'll make everybody wants to be a comedian. There's so many. We'll just make them bring an audience. And then what they would do then is bring in like a regular comic who was working like a headliner, and they'd have a built-in audience on a weekday to work out their real shit while you were up there providing the audience and the drinks, getting no money and fucking not getting that good at what you do. So it was, you know, by the time like you would exhaust that group of friends pretty fucking quickly, because there's 15 friends that you've got and they're like, yeah, we're gonna come fucking see you do stand up. Yeah. And then you go do stand up and you suck, and they're like, all right, well, we're here for the next one, or they think you're good, but whatever, but you've got the same material, because it is working on a lot of the same shit. So you're like trying to perfect a 5-minute set so you can get more road work. But how many times they don't get it, and they're not going to spend like a shit ton of money. There was times I think I did a couple bringer shows where I would pay, and I would just be like, listen, just come. I need people to do this. I got to do whatever. I'll buy your seats and, you know, whatever. But how many times can you do that?
Right.
But I mean, I think, you know, I worked at Bananas Comedy Club, and Harlan and Arlene, who owned it for years since the 80s, and they're now retired, they allowed me to open for Jimmy Fallon in 2009. And I was like 4 years into doing stand-up, and that was huge because he was going to take over for Conan on late night, not for the Tonight Show. This is like before, and this was when Conan was moving to the Tonight Show. So Fallon wanted to go back out on tour and kind of draw up some buzz, and they let me. That was my first national headliner. So that kind of escalated.
You opened for him one time, and he liked
5
you
times.
enough? Or how did it?
No. He didn't like it. Had nothing to do with him. It was just that was the first time I'd opened for a national headliner. Sure. So, and we did 5 shows together, and it was a blast. And then, but from them, that carries you. You know what I mean? I was still working part time at the library, and then I don't remember. There was nothing in particular. I just was like, all right, I'm doing enough gigs, and I don't want to work anymore, and I stopped.
Yeah, you were making enough money that you could at least get by.
And no one says like, but that's 9 times out of 10 people I think that. I think people think someone comes along, or there's an opportunity where someone goes, hey man, I'm going to take you out of this shit. You have to do it yourself. You can't, nobody moves you up in the business. Very rarely does anybody go, you can headline now.
Yeah.
You have to decide.
I think in pretty much anything, it's not like The journey is a very slow climb, much slower than people realize. They see one thing that pops a name that was the first time they saw them.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that was the first time everyone saw them. It is like a little bit slower of a growth. It was like the same way with the show and the same way with your show, I'm sure. You get one guest that everyone recognizes, but that didn't immediately make your listenership 10x.
No, yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Even if it was this huge person. Like I had Lamorne Morris from that show New Girl, like quite a while ago on the show. And at the time, like he was by far the biggest person that I had on. But my streams didn't quadruple when he was on. It didn't matter that he was huge. It made other people all of a sudden think, oh, this must be more legit. But I didn't make more money immediately.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so then a lot of times too, like when you have a side job, and I'm wondering if this is how it worked for you, you kind of have different income streams, right? You start making a little bit of money from comedy and you're still making money from this. A lot of times when you go full time with something, you still end up making a lot less money, but you think like that's enough that you could scrape by while you continue to grow that. Is that kind of how it worked as you dropped off from working at the library to take a pay cut, but it was enough you could like get by with comedy until you could build it up more?
Yeah, I would basically try to live off of what I was making doing stand-up and not touch the money I was making part-time, or like, because I worked at a library and also worked at a state park that was also a beach. So I had like a bunch of different like little jobs that I would do while doing stand-up. But when I was making money doing stand-up, I was like, oh, you know what, let me see if I can not touch that money and focus on what it's like just to live off what I'm doing stand-up. And it was good. And then once it got to the point where I was traveling and doing more road work and doing some writing and stuff, I was like, I think I can sustain myself. And I was never worried about like, you know, I didn't worry about savings or anything like that, because I was just like, I can eat, I can pay my bills, I can pay my rent, and gas and whatever. So I'm good. I don't need anything else. I don't want to go on vacations. Like, that's the thing too. I think people, you probably have the same thing where you're an artist and you're like, you got these friends who are, you know, they're like, oh, we're going on a cruise, or we're going here, or we're going there. And you're just like, nope.
Yeah.
Like, not only can I not afford to do it, I don't even really want to do it, because what I'm spending money on is way more important to me, or, you know, my career.
Well, and the investment is very different, right? People save into a 401k or whatever. And I try to explain to people when I've had people, you know, because what am I going to be 33 here in a couple of weeks? So I'm a little bit younger than you, but you know what I mean? I'm old enough that most of my friends are saving up for those types of things.
Yeah.
And I do have a house and stuff, and like, that's great. But if I have more money, I'm not investing it into something like a 401k, because I have too many other things that I need to invest in that are my business, that are a part of my growth, right? And even if I have money, such as like to come out here, which I didn't spend very much money to come out here at all, because I just got to fly for free with my Delta Amex card. So Delta hooked me up with some kind of a kickback. What in the world? So I get to fly out here for free and I got to stay for free. So I didn't really spend a lot of money, but still, you know, I'm going to do some interviews during the day and then kind of go on vacation in the evening, but I can kind of mix that. My whole life is working, but not working ever. So I don't really feel the need to take exclusively vacations all that often. And when I do want to go on vacation, it's usually like camping type stuff anyways, because my phone's always going off. I'm always have too much going on where like I just kind of want to disappear for a little bit and relax.
The things that my friends and I wind up doing is like every year we'll go to the Poconos or something like that, rent a cabin, chill out, and just, you know, that's like a vacation, I guess, to me. But it's only like twice a year I'll do something like that. But I'm like, I never go on like huge trips or like go to like, well, like, oh, we're going to, you know, the Bahamas, and I'm like, have fucking fun with that.
Well, if I had the money to invest in something like that would be a vacation, there are other things that would make me really happy that are still related to what I do for work, because what I do for work is what I would do for free if I didn't work. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, you do it to a different level where there's stress and there's these other things, but it's the whole question of like, if you didn't have to make any money at all, how would you spend your time?
Oh yeah.
Well, it's like I would spend my time doing extremely similar things to what I do right now, just maybe a little less pressure on myself, but I would still do basically the same things I already do.
Right.
So you started doing comedy like full time. How did it feel? Because I've seen this myself. How did it feel having all of your friends go through like regular life, you know, having kids and having these other things? And that's a huge sacrifice to just say, I'm not even going to try to pursue having a family yet, because it's not an option for me.
Yeah.
Was it kind of hard for you to watch your friends going in those things?
No.
You know, while you're doing your own
I think it goes through phases. You know what I mean? Like, because mostly when you're doing anything like this, any leap of faith career wise is kind of like, am I making the right decision? And that happened in the very beginning when I dropped out of college. So I was like, do I know what the fuck I'm doing? And then having talked to friends about it too, they were like, yeah, man, like you seem like you want to do this thing, so just go ahead. Like, they were cool with it, and it was nice to have that. And then even with like, you know, I've been in a bunch of different relationships and stuff, and, you know, kind of navigating that situation, being like, yeah, do I want to, I only maybe once did I think like, oh, I actually want to marry this girl. And then, whatever. Right. And then I think it crossed my mind. I don't know what that Oh, that's cool. That's the food. That is absolutely hilarious. I love cats, by the way. So that was just great. But I was like, did I just accidentally set off like a secret door? You're like, you hit the code word. Like,
my sister has 3 cats,
around.
and they travel a lot. Her husband, my brother-in-law, is a writer, like I mentioned, so he'll go to Hawaii for a month and a half just to like focus on writing this TV pilot or whatever he's doing. So they have a food dish and water dish that dispenses itself. That's what that noise was, for anybody that was wondering.
I don't even know what that's fucking awesome that there's sorry, I know this is not even what we're supposed to be looking at, but there's a cat door with a door. So the kitty door has a door, and he just burst out of it to get his food. Fucking hysterical. I love this cat. I don't even, what's the cat's name?
There's 3 of them. I can't tell from over here. There's Moriarty. There's whatever.
Moriarty. Oh, that's so fucking great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I heard that noise and I was like, is it gonna like switch over to like a poker thing? Like we're just gonna be like, I'm running an illegal gambling
and
ring.
we heard a landline ring earlier, and I was like, who has a landline in 2023?
Yeah, man, it's just got some kind of side operation. So what we so like watching people pass. It was kind of interesting because now I literally just found out one of my exes is pregnant. And everyone's like, how do you feel about that? And I'm like, fucking fine. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about it. Maybe it's abnormal. Maybe I'm just a psycho. I have no idea. But I genuinely like what I'm doing. And I have no, I have no problem sacrificing what I think everybody else thinks they want. My problem is like when you're aging yourself out of shit. I don't know if you said you're 33, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm 38. So like, it's interesting to me that the way society is kind of, built around, again, like I was saying before, like college, career, job, whatever, wife, family, kids, stuff like that. That is the general consensus of how things should go.
Right.
And if you were outside of that in any shape or form, you were not saying that I'm excluded from anything, but you do feel kind of alienated from the rest of whatever. I'm still close with all my friends from like high school, shit like that, whether they're married or not. We all hang out. We all try to get to see each other whenever. But it's one of those things where it's so like at a point in time, I've known people who thought, man, this looks weird. I should get married. Sure. You know what I mean? Or whatever. Yeah. And then they do it for the wrong reasons. I know people who get married in general for the wrong reasons. So I don't get it. Like, and I think the amount of, this is fucked up. I just think a lot of people are lying.
Yeah. Totally.
And
they lie to themselves.
And I think that when you're in a good relationship or a good marriage, you should really consider yourself fucking lucky, because I don't think, even though a lot of people are in that institution, I don't think a lot of it is going well. You know what I mean? And I think there's, I don't think people think that they're as fortunate as they are when they're like totally happy, because they think everybody should do it. It's like, oh, you just haven't found the right person, or you just haven't done this. And it's like, no, I think I'm fine. Like if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
But other than that, like,
I think it's societal pressure, and people just settle for things in general. They settle for their position with their job. They settle for the house that they could afford, not what they really wanted. They settle for where they live. They settle for a lot of things. And at some point they have all that pressure upon themselves, and they're like, well, I would be happy enough with this, so I guess it works. I've talked to people, I won't say which people I know that are like that, but one of my friends anyways specifically has told me like, yeah, I mean, it's okay, talking about his relationship, and then shortly after is like, yeah, we'll probably have kids soonish, get married, and it's just it's okay.
Nobody fucking sells it well, right?
That's nuts.
Yeah, it is. Nobody like very few people. The people I do know, I can count on one hand, who I'm like, they are meant to be together. It's kismet. They've got a great, family unit. And I'm like, that's fucking awesome. Everybody else I know, I'm like, do you hear yourself? Like, it is like you're not selling me on it. Because they'll ask me like, oh, when are you gonna, when are you gonna finally settle down or whatever? And I'm like, oh, I don't know.
When the right thing pops up, right?
Yeah, and if not, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't even feel like I have friends who desperately want to find somebody because they feel lonely. I don't ever feel lonely. Like I've always got people to talk to, and I like my alone, because I very rarely get it.
Sure.
So I do like my alone time, and I like downtime. That's why I'm always up late too, because not on top of doing shows late. When everyone else is asleep is like my time to fucking do whatever I want to do, chill out. My phone's not going off. I don't have any, emails to check or meetings to go to or anything like that.
How have friendships changed? Because for me, especially, I've noticed like as I'm trying to do different things, friendships from before I ever started doing in anything in this realm, I just don't relate to people as much. So like some of my oldest friends are still my best friends for sure. It's not like I don't relate to anybody.
Same.
But I found a lot of people that just my interests and what I'm trying to do is like so different than what a lot of other people do, especially where I live, that there's like a barrier, there's a disconnect where we want to talk to each other and we get along, but they don't have a perspective on what I do or why I want to do that really at all.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is the people that do have a perspective on that. For me, I don't live near any of these people, so it's hard to, like me and you, I feel like we would go hang out or something, but I don't live here, so it's going to be a minimal thing. But for me, it's hard to find people that are like that, and the ones that I do find that are like that, there's also still a disconnect there of like they're so focused on what they want to do career wise, but that the friendship side of it's really not like the primary focus,
right?
Or it's it's clouded in that kind of way.
Yeah.
Do you have that happen with relationships for yourself a lot?
Absolutely. And I was literally one of my closest friends, we've known each other since middle school. I had posted something which I a group of my friends and I got together. One of my friends works at a bar on the beach, so we all went to go see her, and then we were just eating and whatever, and then we wound up hanging on the dock, and it was fun. Picture wise, it looked good, it looked fun, everyone was having a good time. And then my friend, was like, oh man, I feel like such a piece of shit. I didn't do anything that day. And I saw that you were out enjoying the sun or whatever. And I was like, I was miserable for about a good 75% of it, because like everyone was like talking about like shit that I just didn't either have any interest in, or it was their relation or whatever the hell was going on, where I was like, one of them was like, oh, we're all going to go away on whatever date or whatever. I was like, I can't fucking go away. Like I've got gigs, you know what I mean? Like not. So I was just like in my own head, like, what the fuck am I doing here? This isn't my life anymore. I probably aged out of like doing frivolous shit. I know they like, and I admire it. I'm like, oh great, you guys are still in that phase of doing whatever the hell it is. I love them all, but I'm like, I don't belong in this setting right now. And then I start to think like, what the fuck happened to me? Like there's all this internal shit that's going on all the time too, where I'm like, no, I should be doing, I don't even have like fear of missing out, but I do feel like, oh, I used to do this shit. And then I have to remind myself that I have a whole thing I built, that it's okay to be like, I don't want to say different entirely, but like it's okay to be like, all right, I've got other priorities now.
Yeah.
But you still fucking, you know what I mean? Like, so I've got those group of friends that are still doing that shit. I've got another group of friends who are all married. They don't do anything anymore, like outside of like whatever's busy, localized, and like, which is fine too. And I like doing that. But I'm like, man, it's everybody else that I really connect with is in every other, part of the country. They're in LA, they're in San Francisco, they're performing, they're all over the place, and it's hard to get together with those people. So I even find like communication is like, even have you seen Banshees of Inisherin?
No.
You got to watch this movie because it's like a dark comedy. It's Colin Farrell and oh my God, fuck, I can't think of the dude's name. He was in Harry Potter.
Daniel Radcliffe?
No, older guy. He played the Mad Eye Moody. Gleason. Okay. It's something Gleason. Anyway, he's fantastic. Literally, but it's set in a different, like, years and years ago. And he just doesn't want to be this dude's friend anymore, and they live on a small island, and it's kind of hilarious. But it was unbelievably relatable. We were like, he just didn't, he was like, I want to make music. I got other things I can do. But they live so fucking, there's nothing else going on. It's horse and buggy shit. But like doing the whole thing, I just found it so funny, because even today with social media, the way some people communicate with me is not real communication to me. It's like they find, you find that they're telling you what they're doing, and I'm an idiot who likes to engage. So I'm like, trying to do whatever. And then you realize they don't want to. This is just about updating you on their life.
Sure.
And if you don't respond, or if you're just doing whatever, they kind of chase, they'll be like the audacity of like, whatever. I'm like, let's go out to eat, or this is why I'm so old. But I'm like, let's go fucking do something else. But that's not even the way it's headed to. So I feel left out of that kind of there's way too much shit.
It's a hard thing to balance.
I don't even know what your question was. I'm so sorry.
You emotionally get invested into people, so you want to hang on to something that at one point in time, most friendships and relationships are because it's mutually beneficial and it's convenient, and at some point it's no longer mutually beneficial or convenient.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, so just because we like each other or did in the past, how long do we hang on to this, and how much do I want to keep investing into this? If you don't care to invest in it, does it make sense to invest in it? Are we bad people if we stop investing in it?
Right.
It's like a whole like inner dialogue that I get stuck with. Let's get back to what we were actually talking about besides that. I was curious because I struggle with that a lot with myself, as I've seen after I got divorced and working on this thing and this thing, that like friendships have changed, and it has been a struggle for me to let go of certain things and certain people when it's like not about them being bad or me being bad.
And people come in.
Yeah, new people do come in.
But even people that you let go of that like, or like you think you let go of, you know.
Yeah,
like,
they come back and stuff too.
You know, years later they're like, hey, what's up? And you're like, oh fuck, let's reconnect.
Yeah. So years later, after doing a whole bunch of stand-up, eventually the world shut down, which happened for everybody. And for me, I was reading a thing talking about your show where you were saying, yeah, I mean, it was great because during the pandemic, trying to get a hold of people were available. And I found the same thing, that it was like all these people really early on with my show where it really wasn't established yet. I could get a hold of people that I probably couldn't get a hold of otherwise because they were just like available. Like when I interviewed Lamar Morris, I just had a mutual friend like hit him up and say, hey, any chance you're free? And he's like, yeah, my show is on pause. So I got nothing to do. If you want to kick it, we can. Right. And that happened with a bunch of people out in LA for me that helped me get guests at a time where I probably couldn't get a hold of them before. So it worked. I mean, that pandemic was obviously overwhelmingly horrible otherwise. But from that aspect, it helped. For you, though, during the pandemic, you decided you couldn't be doing stand-up, so you decided to do this show. What exactly is the show? What's the premise of the show? And then you didn't have a plan, I guess, but what was the plan for it?
So I never wanted to do a podcast, and I liked going on podcasts. I liked talking, obviously. But I just didn't want to do it because there's, it is way
oversaturated.
Absolutely. And I'd known a bunch of comics who had podcasts, and I was just like, it just seems not great, like not a good time. So never wanted to do it, but because of the pandemic and stuff, and I couldn't tour, I was writing this show called Dystopia Tonight, and I was about to go out to LA to pitch it among a couple other things.
It was going to be a TV show.
Yeah, I wanted it to be either on a streaming show or something like that. But it was based on having gone to LA a million times for pilot season and meeting with every fucking network or every entertainment company and like almost getting a deal, never having it come through. And I'm very politically aware, and I'm very like kind of socially, about what's going on. And I was like, man, it'd be hilarious. And my luck is right as the planet's dying, I'm the last guy they like give a show to, you know what I mean? Or whatever the hell it is. Or like, so I thought it'd be kind of funny if like every talk show host died. And, it's like end of the world shit. We don't have a lot of time, maybe 6 months or whatever. But the networks, I was like, these fuckers would still want to make money.
Yeah.
Even if everything's burning around them, they would be like, can we squeeze a few more dollars, So I was like, it'd be funny if like that was the case, like whatever, like talk show host stopped. And then they came across me and they're like, this poor schmuck will do it, and then they gave the dude like a show, and I was going to call it Dystopia Tonight. And it was kind of revolving around like we would do a monologue as if the world was ending instead of like that usual New York or LA background the talk show has. It would literally just be an open wall that had like fire and shit and like, whatever demons coming out, whatever the hell's going on. And the joke was going to be that like we were going to have a really big guest, but they died getting there. And then so we would settle for, I don't want to name anybody, but we would settle for whatever the guest was, and they would kind of they would still plug like real shit, that way they'd get a reason to come on.
Yeah.
But then also it would be based around that. Like one of the episodes I'd written was because of the floodwaters, the studio was flooding, but we still had to do the show. So every time we came back from commercial break, the water level would be higher and like camera crew would die. So like by the end of the but we were still doing the show.
Yeah.
So like it was that kind of shit. So Dystopia Tonight had the name, and then literally the pandemic hit, and I was like, this is nuts. So I still had the name. I didn't want to lose it. I liked the idea. And then a bunch of other comics that I do know, we started streaming together on Twitch. And
playing
we
video games or what?
No, like actual we would play Jackbox sometimes, like just comedians.
Oh, just like friends. Okay.
Yeah. Friends would go on, but we'd stream on Twitch and go live and tell everybody like whoever our fan base was, and then kind of just dick around and do that kind of shit. And then we wound up doing a cancer benefit for Children's Brain Tumor Foundation and Star Treatments. Star Treatments is amazing, and it takes kids to and from treatment centers like they're rock stars. So they picks them up in a tour bus,
cool.
Or whatever it is, stacks it full of candy, movies, the whole thing. And so we broke a Guinness World Record, 93 hours, I think, the total streamed for 93 hours. Nobody got any sleep. And we had over 300 comedians on. So I called in favors, other people called in favors. We had everybody come in. And then through that, I met this dude who was kind of doing the back end stuff. And I was like, I don't know how to do any of this shit, but I really want to start this Dystopia Tonight thing. And then he was like, yeah, let's fucking do it. Like, I know how to do, he had like StreamYard account and stuff like that. His name is Tom Bannis. So we became buddies. And then he was working on the back end stuff, and January 6th hit. And I was like, I want to go live. I want to do it now. So then the first episode was with Tommy Taylor Jr., and he's a comedian out from DC that I knew. And he came in and we just played clips of what was going on. We kind of talked about what was happening.
This was like live during that?
Live.
Whoa, okay.
And it was just fun, and it was kind of nutty, and I didn't, it wasn't even like an interview thing. I just had him on. I had another friend on who had passed away because of COVID. Her name is Erica Watson. She actually was in my first comedy class. We're the only two that survived doing stand-up for years, and we'd always keep in touch on our anniversaries and stuff. And so anyway, so that was like the first show. Didn't quite know what it was going to be. And then I was like, if I'm going to do this, I really want to go for it. And I don't just want to do the typical comedian podcast thing where they have their friends on and they try to talk about, topic or whatever the fucking shit's going on. I was like, I want to have, bigger guests. I've done this long enough where I have enough contacts. And I just told my manager, I'm like, let's just try to book people that, whatever. And I would just go off of people that I liked. So, I think our first big guest may have been Ed Asner, and it was like a year before he died.
Who's Ed Asner? I'm not that familiar with entertainment.
So Ed
stuff.
Asner is from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but he's also Santa Claus and Elf.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And then he's also the voice of, a bunch of cartoon characters, J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man. So he's been around for a very long time. So he was like, I think probably the first big guest. Frank Turner was like, I love Frank Turner. If you know, he's a musician out from England, but he's touring with the Counting Crows right now. But he's headlined shows all over the country. He's been around for a while now. But he came on, and that was just from me messaging them. So I was like, "Hey man, I'm doing a show. It's Dystopia Tonight." The name always got people.
Yeah.
And then I just decided like I'm gonna book it through bands I like, comedians I really love and admire. And I'm going to call in some favors, and then I'll just do it that way. And I had friends on, but I just didn't want it to be like, here's 5 New York comics who are in the open mic scene that you've never heard of, and we're just going to shoot the shit. I couldn't bear to do that, but I wanted it to be, so the intro to the show is a montage of January 6th shit, the fires in California, COVID stuff, and then I also threw in some Godzilla shit, like random stuff into the intro, because the idea was, this is insane. This is everything that's going on. But here's an hour of people who are persevering and surviving through it. And they're also making art. They're doing something. And whether they're a nonprofit group or there's some kind of scientist who's got an optimistic viewpoint of what's going on, or they're a musician who's changed the way they write music, produce music, or a comedian who's, finding a different way through all of this garbage.
So a lot of this was
ends.
talking about COVID, like their struggles through COVID. So then what changed after COVID was done, if it's ever done, whatever. But like,
well, yeah, the thing that it's changed through after COVID is that this genuine feeling of dystopia never ends, and everybody has their own perception of what it is and what it means and how they're dealing and coping with it, because everybody's in a mental health crisis at the moment. And I hope, knock on wood, you want everything to kind of go by the wayside, but it doesn't look like it, it never is. And people kind of tossed around that word dystopia for a long time. The right uses it in very different terms, the left uses it in very different terms, and so I just think people have a very kind of unique perspective on what that means, and especially when it comes to their own lives. So that's kind of where the show has been evolved. And one of the staple questions, I ask 3 questions at the end of every episode, and one of the key ones is, if this was a genuine dystopia and there was a government collapse, you know, and you had your choice of whatever the disaster was, what would be your epic death? How would you want to go out? Everybody has 1 day left. Everybody knows they have 1 day left. So what would be your epic death? Some people get very serious with it.
Yeah.
Most people are like, oh God, what would I want? Alien, you know, like whatever the hell it is. Like Colin Mockery was like, I want an alien race to need my sperm to survive. And he's like, so they make love to me until I'm a husk. And and so a lot of people had like really goofy shit like that.
Yeah,
sure.
Sure.
Some people are like dark as fuck. They're like, I want to go out quick, mountaintop, comet, huge explosion, or I want to be dragged off by whatever. And some people are really surprised, and they're like, dude, fuck you, I'd survive, like I would live, you know what I mean? I'm like, really, you'd want to be like around? So it's a lot of fun to do that kind of shit.
I'm gonna have to learn some stand-up comedy stuff from you, just starting to hang out with you more, because everyone tells me, what, you have a podcast? Well, I listen to podcasts, but like, ones with comedians, because they're funny. Like, you're not funny. I'm like, okay, well, fuck you too then. I have one accolade. Really silly, really stupid. You don't have it. I do. I won an award for most luscious radio voice.
Nice,
in my sound.
man.
I got a little plaque and everything.
That's great.
I may not be funny, but at least I fucking sound good.
Yeah.
I just put some paper in front of you because you're a cartoonist, and I draw little cartoon kind of things as well. So just for my own personal collection, I would love for you to draw me something. I know I'm putting you on the spot like a monkey. Like, do this for me. But while we're talking, I want you to try to draw something, and then I will post it as well so everyone sees what you end up drawing. Right. Getting back to the questions of it. So creating a podcast, anyone can do it at this point, right? Like when I record my first episode, especially just to like try it out, because people have asked me what's the first steps, and I said I downloaded Audacity for free, use the internal mics. Had a friend come over, we drank beer and talked, just so I could like kind of figure out how it worked. And that really was like all it took for me to like get it off the ground. However, for you have a manager, you're getting all these people, and especially as the pandemic lifts, you have opportunities and you are still doing stand-up, but you do have to pay bills. How does somebody build a business that actually makes any kind of income from a podcast? It's hard to do. I make some, but it's hard.
Dude, I'm still fucking learning. Like there is that I recently just got a brand new manager, so we have a whole different plan and everything that's going on. I just signed with another management agency, Brook Forest Entertainment. So there's a lot of new shit happening on the advent of having this podcast. I am not good with business. I'm fully developed, like in anything artistically done, anything graphics wise, any kind of, write anything stand up wise, performing, all that other shit. I'm a fucking moron when it comes to any of that shit, because I can't stand it. I hate it. I always, I don't like endless meetings. Don't like endless meetings. I hate meetings for the sake of meetings, which a lot of dudes seem to really fucking love because they feel like they did something that day. I can't handle any of that shit. So making money off of the podcast was never the goal at the time. I was like, I'm bored during the pandemic. I need some kind of thing to do. I did other shit to make, to supplement some income and stuff. And actually I illustrated a couple books during the pandemic for money and shit. And I did a couple Zoom shows, but I fucking hated that too. So the podcast has not generated me a shit ton of money yet. We're monetizing on YouTube finally. And I think we were making some money off of Twitch at the time because we got early because everybody was home. So monetization came pretty quickly for the Twitch side. But other than that, no, I'm not good with that end of it. I just really wanted to talk to people. And I wanted to talk to people that I, otherwise probably wouldn't be able to. That's where the musicians thing came in. Because I was like, I love Toad the Wet Sprocket. I wonder if Glenn Phillips is around. And even that was like, I think a little after everybody was, or I think people were still kind of in the pandemic, but maybe just coming out of it. But at that point, I had already kind of built up the guest list too. Yeah. So, I also utilized my own resume. You know what I mean? Like, so the way we packaged stuff was, here's who I am. And that's kind of, a nice little boost because I've been doing stand-up for a long time. I do have a decent amount of credits. And then, plus kind of word of mouth and getting everybody else to kind of like, we would, my manager at the time would, when a guest came on, be like, hey, if you had a good time, could you give us 1 or 2 lines of a testimonial? And they'd be like, yeah, absolutely. And, they always had a fucking blast because I'm not a real, like, I mean, I am I'm very good at the interview stuff. But I didn't know that at the time. I was just a comedian looking to do something. And I think I give a unique interview, and I've got a little bit of ADD going on. So, there's like, it's just a conversation that I like to have, and they wind up trusting me and I trust them. So it's a unique experience, I think. And then through word of mouth, people wind up wanting to come back on. So I think through that stuff's good. That's what's important to me. Everybody else can handle the business side. And now they're kind of like dealing with that. But yeah, it has not been profitable for me. Stand up is still the thing. So going back on the road is what's making me money.
So how are you going to continue? I mean, you don't do all your interviews in person, which I think is one thing that makes it possible.
Yeah.
But like, how are you going to continue to make it sustainable then as other opportunities like comedy and stuff are popping? You still want to be doing the podcast.
So we're going to transition. We're going to transition into, so a lot of the things we're going to do now is live. So I'm going to wind up taking Dystopia Tonight on the road and do also like music festivals and stuff, and kind of get into, that arena, because I really do. We've got some contacts with theaters and stuff who really like the show, whose performers have come on the show when they're going to be in the area. We're going to do like a mix of like stand-up comedy, have like a show, like if it's a musician, they'll play some stuff, and then they'll do the podcast and they'll sit down and talk at the end. So that's kind of what we're branching out to do.
So another question I have, I mean, for me, I found kind of little tips and tricks of like how to get a hold of people, and I'll just throw a couple out. One, if somebody doesn't have a thing that they want to promote, it's kind of hard to get a hold of them because they like their privacy and their personal time. If they don't have to do anything, even if it's fun, they would rather go on vacation and be relaxing. I would too. Totally makes sense. So if you can identify somebody who has something that they want to promote in some kind of a way, obviously don't make the show about promoting them, but if they have something that they have to promote, it's a little easier to get a hold of people for various different projects. And if you just go like, you can send somebody a DM, but you can go follow through and see, okay, if you go to their website, they may have a manager or a contact us. If you contact them from several different ways, you'll stand out apart from everybody else that just sends somebody a message. So those types of things definitely make sense and help. Oh, actually, another quick question too, while we're at it. What was with the cartooning thing? You've always drawn. How did you even get hired to like illustrate a book? You didn't have like an art. Well, you don't have to have an art degree to do that, but like, how did that even line up?
So that was also word of mouth. So basically, the cartooning thing was, I only ever wanted to do two things when I was younger, and it was either be a comedian or be a cartoonist. And I loved cartoons. I always read the Sunday Funny Pages. I was a big Garfield fan at the time. I know, which is like, everybody is like, that's their like guilty pleasure, because he doesn't even draw the strip anymore. But it was one of those things where like, I was like, this is great. And I liked cats, and I loved Peanuts, and Berkeley Breathed. Bloom County was another one that was just politically relevant at the time, and like so fucking funny and irreverent. And The Far Side I was a huge fan of. So I liked that. And when I was in class, I didn't want to be there. So my escape was, if I could draw the shit I like to watch while I'm home, I don't have to deal with this horse shit. And then also it was a great way to meet people, girls especially, because they're like, oh, do you want that cartoon character drawn on your fucking, the paper book that you have, whatever. So I would do that kind of stuff. And then that seemed more feasible to me for some reason than stand-up did, or comedy, or even acting did. I didn't know that, I wasn't in plays when I was younger. But I was like, I'm just going to be the funny cartoon guy. And I drew for my school newspaper. And then once I would do it a little bit, and I was like, no, this is definitely going to be my thing, writing and drawing. And then I really wanted to do stand-up. So when I dropped out, I kind of left the drawing by the wayside. I just didn't do it anymore. And then I would doodle every now and again, but nothing significant. And then while I was doing stand-up and I was out on the road in hotels, I would just I would have jokes that maybe I was like, I don't know if that's great for the stage, but I could see it in my head. And I was like, I'm just going to draw it. So I started doing that in hotel rooms on my iPad. And if it was politically relevant, I would post them on my Instagram, and people really like it, or just what I was feeling at the time or whatever. And then I wound up having enough to put together into a book. And I was like, I'm gonna make a book. And I was like, and I'll sell it while I'm on the road. I don't even care if it goes, whatever. And it was called Drawings from a Nobody, because at the time I thought it was hilarious that, why would I come out with a book? Nobody knows who the fuck I am. Sure. So I drew a little picture of myself on the front cover, and then I just had all these other things, and I'd sent it out to this dude at the New Yorker, this cartoonist, who gave me a nice little review of it. I kind of sent it around a bit, but it wound up being mostly like look, he's motivated and look what he can do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was great for me, and people really loved the cartoon. So I wound up getting into an art, like an art show with it. And at this, what do they call it? Why can't I think of the name? Holy fuck.
Like a
art
gallery?
gallery. Thank you.
Yeah.
Art gallery in Montclair. And they were like, we really like your cartoons. Why don't you, you can have a whole wall. And I was like, cool. And then I didn't think I belonged there because there was a dude who like literally ripped bumpers off cars and like repainted them to look like these are people who like, we're doing like these beautiful pieces of art. And I'm like, I draw lines and my color scheme is off. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. But, it wound up being the most popular part of the gallery, which I thought was cool. Like the mayor was there and shit. And then from that, I like kind of leveraged that a little bit. And then people would just kind of find me through the comedy community if somebody needed a book drawn or something done for their pages or a coloring book or whatever. So yeah, that's what I wound up doing.
Art's funny in that kind of way where I felt the same insecurities with mine of like, why do you want me in this thing? I just draw these dumb little monsters.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
people like them.
People
It's unique
love
and
that
they
shit.
catch up. And then, I look at like my favorite artists in particular. Like one of them, his name's Luca Buffo, and he does like kind of these colorful characters and stuff. And they aren't like Mona Lisas. You know what I mean? Like they aren't like crazy technically difficult, hard necessarily to try to recreate. It was just the idea and the unique style that I was really drawn to. So I've eventually built a little bit more of like confidence in my art, but I still feel really insecure when I go up against, when I shouldn't say go up against, but when my art is next to somebody else that has been doing art like full time as a career for the past however many years. And they clearly put a lot of time, money, energy into whatever they do. And I'm just like using random acrylics and like making this thing, or like I started doing some paper mache sculpting and I'm like, this is literally child's play. I'm using paper mache to create this and then people like it. And I'm like, dope. Okay, so a lot of it's building personal brand, right? To be able to make the show or anything else happen.
Right.
What would be a couple pieces of advice, things to do and things not to do for anybody in a creative realm that wants to kind of come up and build their own personal brand, whether it's through comedy, whether it's through music, whether it's through art or anything else? What would be some like or some good to do, some advice for them in a positive way and some things to say like avoid doing this?
I would avoid trying to. You've seen TikTok and all this shit. It's a lot of homogenous stuff. Like, and I would try to avoid as much as possible doing the same shit that everybody else is doing, and like stick to what is true to you, and your audience I think will come from that, because that's what stand up teaches you. Like, that's kind of what I apply to every other aspect of what I'm doing. Like, I like my cartoons. I like the drawing style that I do. And I like the topics, whatever I want to cover and talk about. I understand that there's other people that are covering, that want you to talk about this thing or want you to do that. But I think if you just, however long it may take, but you'll find yourself better if, and your art will be better if you just do what is right for you. And it's almost the same thing when they talk about if you're a writer, write what you know. Same thing applies to every other aspect of art. Is just do what makes you happy, do what you think is funny, and that audience is going to come to you.
Yeah, and they'll be loyal. Rather than if you just kind of chase random trends, you'll get some people pop along to see you do this thing, but none of the rest of your stuff is like that. And as you go back in the direction of where you are, they don't care anymore. Right. So it really doesn't grow it like sustainably. It just kind of like pops off here and there for very small things, and really it just doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what else do you want to do? Where are your current goals? You're going to go back on tour, right? Is it going to be like nationwide thing? Do you have goals of trying to go international and go over to the UK and do a whole bunch of jokes?
I would love to go out to the UK.
What are your goals right now? What's going to happen?
Mostly just going back on tour. Definitely going to be a nationwide thing. We're building that up now. I'm going to be in New Hampshire in a couple of weeks doing an opera house. And I don't know when this is going to air, so that won't make any sense. Sure. Like, we missed that fucking gig. But yeah, I'm going back out on the road doing that. And I think we're just building up on Dystopia. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to fall under that brand. So stand-up shows, live gigs, live interviews. And we're going to actually make it so we go out to those places. Like, no, I'm not going to have one central location where this stuff kind of happens and whoever's in town happens to be there. We're going to go out on the road under the Dystopia guys and kind of bring that like level of entertainment.
And it brings something different. It's the same way with podcasts. People say, well, why don't you do more remote? I'm like, you don't get the exact same thing. Sometimes that's really the only option. So far, I've done literally all of them in person, and I've had to turn down interviews I would like to do, but they were only available in that kind of a realm. But doing it in person makes it a totally different experience. Okay, so you said you have some questions that you always ask on your show. I have one that I always ask on my show.
Sweet.
And so the show is called The Passion Pod. I interview people pursuing careers based on their passions to inspire others. So we have to have an inspirational storytelling kind of an experience here. So what is a story that you can share that you're extremely grateful for, but it only happened because you chose to pursue your passions as a career?
Oh man. Wow, that is really putting me on the spot. I'm trying to think. I feel like there's a bunch that are jumping out in my head. And I think I wouldn't say there was any opportunity in particular, because I've had a bunch of different opportunities, which is cool career-wise. I think the best thing about the pursuing my passion is I got to meet and be friends with a lot of the people that shaped who I am as a person, as a comedian, and I'm eternally grateful for that. If I had to stop doing stand-up for some reason, or whatever the hell the deal is, I would still be like, that was a fucking blast, because especially through Dystopia, like the guests that I've had on, they're all chosen by me, and they're all people that I admire for one reason or the other. And it's kind of hard when you're talking to these guys, to just be like, fuck, like you don't understand, like my whole child, you know what I mean? Like I remember you doing this, I remember doing that. I listened to your music when I was sad, or it lifted me up when this, whatever. And you just got to stay fucking cool and like talk to these people. And I think they get it too. Like, there's moments I've definitely had, but, or comedians or whatever the hell it is. But like, that has been the best. And awesome to have them recognize my work. This is kind of nerdy, but like, I had, Noel Gallagher from the Cranberries on, and so people have followed me on Instagram. It was such a surreal thing to have him like my stand-up that I'd post.
Yeah.
And or do whatever. And I'd be like, that is nuts to me. And I always try to keep like a level head about it. Like, all right, that's really cool, but you're still doing your own shit or whatever. But that's fucking awesome to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's in and of itself. I would not have gotten the opportunity to meet any of these people, talk to them, be friends with them, if I didn't try to do 5 minutes of really, shitty material at the time. And, 17 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, trying not to fangirl out is something that I struggle with every once in a while. Thankfully, a lot of times I meet people through somebody that I know. And like for you, I really wasn't familiar with you until Santino told me about you.
Right.
And then I look into it and I'm like, oh, cool. Watch a little bit of the stand-up. I'm like, yeah, this dude's dope. But I don't have it built in my mind for years and years, But like random quick ones, I interviewed Willie Santos, who was pro for Tony Hawk's company, Birdhouse, for 25 years. I interviewed him down in Florida.
Oh, so that's sick.
Did that interview. He obviously talked about Tony periodically, and I posted some reels. And there was 2 or 3 of them that referenced Tony Hawk, so I tagged him.
Nice.
And then saw the little like Tony Hawk liked this post.
Oh, sick.
And I was like, what? And I don't freak out about social media, and he liked a post, whatever.
Yeah,
but still, me being a skateboarder, and for 23 years a skateboarder, he's the most significant name in skateboarding history.
Yep.
To just see him even just like a post or a couple of them was like, oh my God, I'm screenshotting this.
Yeah.
That's like, I was fanning out. And then I also recently, which is going to be on the same season as you, interviewed this rapper, singer, songwriter named Sunreal, who on Spotify last year is my 5th most streamed artist. So
Holy
I'm a
shit, dude.
big fan of his. Yeah. And so he posted on his social media, I don't know how long ago, 6 months ago or something, that he was going on his first tour since before the pandemic.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, whoa, okay, cool. So I DM'd him randomly, thinking like, who knows, maybe the show's gotten bigger. Some people respond now.
Right.
I was like, hey, what's the chance that you do an interview when you come through St. Paul? I own a skateboard shop. You grew up skateboarding. It would make sense, you know? And he was like, yeah, sure. So he gave me his manager's info, and then months later, this was not long ago now, he came through St. Paul, and I got to go interview him backstage before his performance. I was there at like 3 o'clock, walked in at the same time, and then he was just super cool and let me hang out the whole night.
That's fucking
hung
sick,
out with him
dude.
Backstage from like 3 until almost midnight. Him and his whole squad, all those guys.
Yeah.
And I remember like I fanned out a little bit during the episode, more than I normally would, and it's fine, whatever. But I was talking to him afterwards, and I was like, dude, really though, I can't thank you enough for taking time to do this. This like meant a lot to me. I appreciate it. And he just candidly was like, dude, you really don't need to thank me. Like, I didn't do it because of like you asking me. I did it because my manager said it was a good idea because you're crushing it.
Right.
So your show's doing really well.
Yeah.
Congratulate yourself.
Absolutely, dude.
That recognition to me was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, not because you were doing me a favor, but you respect what I do.
Yep.
When I have so much respect for what you do, that means a fucking lot to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, those types of experiences mean a lot. And now meeting you, I can just tell we're going to be friends. I'm going to have to come see the show tonight. And I am planning on coming back out to New York. So you are now going to be one of the people where I'm like, yo, you know, a bunch of people who would naturally make sense, but we're going to like record for an hour, but realistically talk for 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could absolutely.
So we're coming to the end of the show. I always like to ask people as well, where can people best follow you? Where can they see all your stuff? How can they support your vision and your dreams and your goals in the future? How can they do all that?
You guys could go to dystopiatonight.com, watch as many episodes as you possibly can. I swear to God, there's a guest for everybody on that show. So you'll be able to find someone. Subscribe to the Apple Podcast, Spotify as well. It's just Dystopia Tonight with John Poveromo, and my website, johnpoveromo.com.
Pretty easy. If you just search it, even if you spell it wrong, it pops up pretty quick.
Isn't that weird that I'm the only? It's kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, if this is your first time listening to the show, you can find Passion Pod literally everywhere. Look up anywhere. It's on the radio. It's on everywhere. It's all the streaming platforms. It's on YouTube. It'll say the person's name, the guest. It'll say their name, but then in parentheses what they do. And since my show is kind of all over the place, pick whatever industry sounds relatively interesting to you after listening to John's episode, obviously. And then you can kind of go back through the catalog and find whatever. You can also go to passionpod.org. There's merchandise that you can buy there. You can support the show via Patreon or donations or whatever. If you like the show, the very least, you could just like give it a little review or give it a shout out on Instagram. Either way, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.